that government at all levels, federal, state, and local, was consuming about 27% of the U.S. economy. Today, it consumes about 37% of the U.S. economy. It's on track to get to 40%. We cease at some point to be a free economy. And the idea of saying, we just want a little more, just give us some more tax revenue, we need that, that is not the answer for America. The answer is to cut federal spending. The answer is to cap how much the federal government can spend as a percentage of our economy and have a balanced budget amendment. And the second part of the answer is to get our economy to grow. Because the idea of just cutting and taxing more, I understand mathematically those things work, but nothing works as well as getting the economy going.
But could we
get Americans back to work. Get them paying taxes, get corporations growing in America, investing in America, bring dollars back, as Rick said, repatriation dollars, bring $1.3 trillion back from overseas, invest in the United States, get this economy going, and I'll tell you, these kinds of problems will disappear.
But could we get back to the actual choice that is likely to confront Congress at the end of the year, which is some mix of revenues and cuts, or these draconian automatic spending cuts that would include defense? Which of those two, if that is the choice, would you prefer?
Well, my choice is not to cut defense. I think it's a terrible idea to cut defense. I think it's a terrible idea to raise taxes, particularly at a time when the economy's struggling. The idea of raising taxes, taking more money away from the American people so government can spend it, and can spend it. Right now, the president has a jobs bill. So how does last jobs bill work out for us?
But this is the automatic cuts?
No, I do not want the automatic cuts. I want to see that super committee take responsibility for getting the economy going again by reining in the scale of the federal government and saying we're going to pull back on some of the programs we have and reform our entitlements so they're sustainable. The American people want to see growth and jobs, and they believe that the right way to do it is by cutting back on the scale of government, and they're right.
And without any increase in revenue.
I just want to say one thing about the entire way Washington works, which was just posed in that question. First of all, the Congress couldn't figure out how to get the debt ceiling done with a president who showed zero leadership. So they adopt a truly stupid bill. Okay? And the bill basically says we're either going to shoot ourselves in the head or cut off our right leg, and we'll come in and around Thanksgiving, and we'll show you how we're going to cut off the right leg, and the alternative will be shooting ourselves in the head. Let me just say bluntly, all of the spending cuts that are built into the debt ceiling bill, all of them are acts of Congress. They can all be repealed at any moment. It is nonsense to say we're going to disarm the United States unilaterally because we're too stupid to balance the budget any other way.
All right. Congressman Bachmann.
Last summer, I was a leading voice in the wilderness of Washington, and a lone voice, as a matter of fact, saying, do not increase the debt ceiling. By that, what I was saying is, let's not give Barack Obama another $2.4 trillion blank check to spend. Think of what this means. Our government right now, this is significant. We are spending 40% more than what we take in. We all paid a lot of taxes this year. We paid $2.2 trillion in taxes. That's a lot of money from all the American people. The American government spent 100% of that $2.2 trillion. But the travesty is they spent $1.5 trillion more than that. That's the problem. Every year we are spending about 40% more than what we take in. Our answer has to be that we cut back on the spending so we get to balance. We can't do this because
cutting back on the spending
all around us are young people that are going to be paying for this burden. And their tax rates won't be our tax rates. Their tax rates could come at some point, their overall effective burden. I'm a federal tax lawyer. That's what I do for a living. And my background is in economics. Their tax rate someday in their peak earning years, Charlie, could be as much as 75%. Who's going to get out of bed in the morning to go to work if they're paying 75% tax rates? We've got to get our spending house in order and cut back on spending.
Cutting back on spending, in your judgment, will do it.
That's one piece of the answer. That's not the whole answer, but we have to cut
I want you to take a look. We'll come to all of you. But let me take a look at another clip. This one you will recognize as well. Here it is.
It's called the 999 plan. It imposes a 9% business tax, flat tax, a 9% personal flat tax, and a 9% national sales tax.
That
I said we would get back to 999. Mr. Kaine, you say that your plan is revenue neutral. And last year, the U.S. collected $2.2 trillion in tax revenue. But Bloomberg government has run the numbers, and your plan would have raised no more than $2 trillion. And even with that shortfall, you'd still be slapping a 9% sales tax on food and medicine.
The problem with that analysis is that it is incorrect. The reason it's incorrect is because they start with assumptions that we don't make. Remember, 999 plan throws out the current tax code, and it starts with 3 simple economic driving principles. Production drives the economy, risk-taking drives growth, and we need sound money. Measurements must be dependable. Now, what 999 does, it expands the base. When you expand the base, we can arrive at the lowest possible rate, which is 999. The difference between the 999 plan and the other plans that are being proposed is that they pivot off of the existing tax code. We've had an outside firm, independent firm, dynamically score it, and so our numbers will make it revenue neutral.
All right.
But then
Karen,
explain
go ahead.
why,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Under your plan, all Americans should be paying more for milk, for a loaf of bread, and beer.
And pizza.
I don't buy beer. You have to start with the biggest tax that a lot of Americans pay, which is the payroll tax, 15.3%. That goes to 9%. That's a 6 percentage point difference, and the prices will not go up. So they've got a 6 percentage point difference to apply to the national sales tax piece of that. And in doing so, they have the flexibility to decide on how much they want to spend it on new goods, how much they want to spend it on used goods, because there's no tax on used goods.
But Congresswoman Bachmann, you're a former IRS lawyer. Do you agree?
I would have to say that the 999 plan isn't a jobs plan, it is a tax plan. And I would say that from my experience being in Congress, but also as a federal tax lawyer, the last thing you would do is give Congress another pipeline of a revenue stream, and this gives Congress a pipeline in a sales tax. A sales tax can also lead to a value-added tax. The United States Congress put into place the Spanish-American War tax in 1898. We only partially repealed that in 2006. So once you get a new revenue stream, you're never going to get rid of it. And one thing I would say is when you take the 999 plan and you turn it upside down, I think the devil's in the details.
All right, I have to.
You got to let me respond.
Yeah, we've given you several chances to respond. I'll come back. We'll continue to talk about taxes and spending. We also know here that there has been a paradigm shift in the world economic order. We know about China and we know about India. Here is our next clip, and we will respond from that. Here it is.
And I will label China as it is, a currency manipulator, and I will go after them for stealing our intellectual property, and they will recognize that if they cheat, there is a price to pay. I certainly don't want a trade war with anybody. And we're not going to have a trade war, but we can't have a trade surrender either.
Karen.
Okay, Governor Huntsman, you were also ambassador to China, and you say that this would risk a trade war. But if China is indeed keeping its currency low, that means that everything they sell in this country is artificially cheap, and everything that our companies try to sell in China is artificially expensive. So what do you say to people who ask, aren't we already in a trade war with China?
Well, first of all, I don't subscribe to the Don Trump school or the Mitt Romney school of international trade. I don't want to find ourselves in a trade war. With respect to China, if you start slapping penalties on them based on countervailing duties, you're going to get the same thing in return, because what they're going to say, because of quantitative easing, part 1 and part 2, you're doing a similar thing to your currency. And then you're going to find yourself in a trade war very, very quickly. And what does that do? That disadvantages our small businesses, it disadvantages our exporters, it disadvantages our agricultural producers. So I say, for the first and the second largest economies in the world, we have no choice. We have to find common ground. We have to, of course, use our trade laws and use them very, very aggressively. But at the end of the day, we've got to find more market opening measures. We've got to get more governors from this country together with governors from provinces of China, mayors together with mayors, and exploit the opportunities that exist for exporters. That's a job creator in this country. It's a huge job creator, and we have to get used to the fact that as far as the eye can see into the 21st century, it's going to be the United States and China on the world stage.
You know, Governor Romney, this issue does carry a lot of resonance, especially in states like New Hampshire, which, as you probably know, has lost a greater percentage of its manufacturing jobs to China than any other state. But voters have heard candidates talk tough on China before. George W. Bush did it, Barack Obama did it, only to see that once elected, the president takes a much more cautious approach because of the complexity of the relationship and the fact that this is our biggest creditor. Why should voters believe that you would be any different?
I'm afraid that people who've looked at this in the past have been played like a fiddle by the Chinese. And the Chinese are smiling all the way to the bank, taking our currency and taking our jobs and taking a lot of our future. And I'm not willing to let that happen. I'm in this race to try and get America to make sure we're strong again. We're creating jobs. We're the best place in the world to be middle class again. And for that to happen, we got to call cheating for what it is.
But it was only...
And you can't, you know, people say, well, we might have a trade war with China. Well, now think about that. We buy this much stuff from China. They buy that much stuff from us. You think they want to have a trade war? I mean, this is a time when we're being hollowed out by China that is artificially holding on their prices, as you just said a moment ago, and that's having a massive impact on jobs here. It is the wrong course for us. When people have pursued unfair trade practices, you have to have a president that will take action. And on day one, I've indicated day one, I will issue an executive order identifying China as a currency manipulator. We'll bring in action against them in front of the WTO for manipulating their currency, and we will go after them. If you're not willing to stand up to China, you'll get run over by China, and that's what's happened for 20 years.
But as recently as...
Let me go to Governor Perry and then Governor Hunter. Governor Perry.
We're missing this so much. What we need to be focused on in this country today is not whether or not we're going to have this policy or that policy. What we need to be focused on is how we get America working again. That's where we need to be focused. And let me tell you, we're sitting on this absolute treasure trove of energy in this country. And I don't need 999. We don't need any plan to pass Congress. We need to get a president of the United States that is committed to passing the types of regulations, pulling the regulations back, freeing this country to go develop the energy industry that we have in this country. I can promise you that we do that, and we'll create an environment in this country where the manufacturing will come back to this country. We did it in Texas. We brought Xi manufacturing that had business in China back to the state of Texas. You free up this country's entrepreneurs where they know that they can risk their capital and have a chance to have a return on investment. And all of this conversation that we're having today becomes substantially less impactful.
All right, I want to come back to these issues, but let me introduce, speaking of CEOs and business, this is a New Hampshire native. His name is David Cody. He is chairman and CEO of Honeywell, and he is a former member of the Simpson-Bowles Commission. Here he is.
20 years ago, there were 1 billion people actively participating in the global economy. Today, there are more than 4 billion active participants in the global economy, with China, India, former CIS states, and other emerging economies now in the game. While that is a good and peaceful phenomenon, it also means we need to compete more strongly than we did in the past. We need an American competitiveness agenda. We need to inspire that American competitive spirit that has served us so well for over 200 years. I would like to ask, what would be on your American competitiveness agenda? And with one last small request, my guess is all of us are ready to accept that we're a great country and a great people. So if your response could focus on specifics, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Senator Santorum, we talked about jobs in Pennsylvania. A competitive agenda of yours would be what?
Well, I already put forward a plan. You know, Mitt, I don't want to go to a trade war. I want to beat China. I want to go to war with China and make America the most attractive place in the world to do business. And we need to do that with the agenda that I outlined, which, unlike Herman's plan, which could not pass, because how many people here are for a sales tax in New Hampshire? Raise your hand. There you go, Herman. That's how many votes you'll get in New Hampshire. Yeah. We're not going to give the federal government, Nancy Pelosi, a new pipeline, a 9% sales tax for consumers to get hammered by the federal government. How many people believe that we'll keep the income tax at 9%? Anybody? Right. That's why people won't trust.
So if you keep mentioning 999 and Herman Cain, I'm going to have to go back to him every other question.
Thank you. Hold on. That's right.
Charlie, I'm not done yet.
Thank you.
I'm not done yet. I've only been able to answer one question, unlike everybody else here. So let me just finish what I'm saying. Right. We need to repeal Obamacare. That's the first thing we need. You want to create jobs? I was in Ossipee yesterday, and I talked to a small businessman there, and he said, I will not hire anybody. I will not make a move until I find out what's going to happen with this health care bill and how it's going to crush me. And so repealing Obamacare, and we can do it. Not by waivers. That's the wrong idea, Mitt. The reason that's the wrong idea, because you get a waiver. California going to waive that? No. New York going to waive it? No. All these states, many of them, liberal states, are going to continue on, and then states like New Hampshire that will waive it will end up subsidizing California. We need to repeal it.
Yes, you did.
We need to repeal
it. But there's time.
I know. Well,
time. You see the red light. Time.
We need to repeal it.
All right.
By doing it through a reconciliation process, and since I have the experience and know how to do that, we'll take care of it.
I've got to go to the break, but I'm both going to give both Herman Cain and Governor Romney a chance to make their point, because they will both mention first Cain, then Romney, then break.
Therein lies the difference between me, the non-politician, and all of the politicians. They want to pass what they think they can get passed rather than what we need, which is a bold solution. 999 is bold, and the American people want a bold solution, not just what's going to kick the can down the table, down the road.
Governor Romney.
Rick, you're absolutely right. On day one, granting a waiver from all 50 states doesn't stop at its tracks entirely Obamacare. That's why I also say we have to repeal Obamacare, and I will do that on day two with a reconciliation bill, because, as you know, it was passed by reconciliation, 51 votes. We can get rid of it with 51 votes. We have to get rid of Obamacare and return to the states the responsibility. No, not if you get rid of it. And particularly, by the way, the Supreme Court may get rid of it. Let me finish.
Okay, let him finish. Then we go to Huntsman. Then we go to the break. And then when we come back, each of you can question each other.
Hold on. That's the deal. And let me just say this, which is, we all agree about repeal and replace. And I'm proud of the fact that I put together a plan that says what I'm going to replace it with. And I think it's incumbent on everybody around this table to put together a plan that says this is what I'll replace it with, because the American people are not satisfied with the status quo. They want us to solve the problem of health care, to get it to work like a market, and that's what has to happen.
All right. Governor Huntsman, then we go.
It's disingenuous to just say that you can waive it all away. The mandate will be in place. The IRS is already planning on 19,500 new employees to administer that mandate. That will stay, and that's the ruinous part of Obamacare. And that, Mitt, your plan is not going to do anything about it.
I said we're going to repeal it. What, did you miss that?
No, it doesn't repeal the mandate.
No, I said I'm going to repeal it.
Wait, hold on.
Through reconciliation, you can repeal the taxes, you can repeal the spending, and therefore the mandate has no teeth because there's no tax penalty if you don't enforce them.
All right, we have much to talk about. When we come back, the candidates will ask questions of each other after this break.
Welcome back to Hanover, New Hampshire. I'm Margaret Brennan on the scene at the Republican presidential debate. We'll be back in just a few moments. The candidates are taking a break. With me here, Bloomberg contributor Matthew Dowd. Has anyone thus far deviated from the script?
No, they really haven't. I thought the last 5 minutes of this, which is going to be great going into the question to question by candidates, is going to be really interesting, because I think the kitchen table that Charlie wanted to start really started heating up at the end of this, when they really got into a dispute over Obama health care and what they would do, and over Herman Cain's 999 plan. I was struck by the fact that there was so much discussion about Herman Cain's 999 plan. That seemed to be a pivot point for much of this.
Right, and he, as we've been talking about, has skyrocketed in the polling to the #2 position right after Mitt Romney. But I wonder, is it the danger in coming into this with specific plans laid out versus, say, a Rick Perry, who has remained somewhat mum as to what he wants to do for jobs and taxes?
I think Rick Perry needs to come on stronger in the second half of this debate. I think many of the questions that people came into this debate were what was his economic plan. They've been asking about it ever since the last debate when he didn't lay one out. For 10 days or 2 weeks, they've been talking about it. People thought he would come up and say, here's some elements of my plan, or here's what I want to do. He hasn't said any. They approached him 2 or 3 times on it. He says you'll hear about it in the next 3 days. I think he has to come on a lot stronger in the last part of this debate and really start answering those questions.
Some heat as well in the debate so far around China. Mitt Romney, John Huntsman eyeing each other there. John Huntsman laying out as trade ambassador to China what he would want to see, and really saying Mitt Romney's plan is a dangerous one to call China a currency manipulator.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, Governor Huntsman came to this debate prepared. He's much more energetic in this debate. I think he feels much more comfortable in this economic discussion, especially at the global scale. But you're right. It almost just seemed like Governor Huntsman was the sort of the pro-China trade position, and Mitt Romney was sort of like, it doesn't matter, we're going to do what we're going to do, and if we get in a war, so be it, that's what will happen. But both of these guys, one has a specific domestic plan, the other one has a much experience on the global scale, and it was an interesting tension.
I was surprised that Mitt Romney did not have a response to Juliana Goldman's question about a financial crisis and being on the verge of one. He seemed to think it was too hypothetical.
Yeah, he didn't want to answer it, but he also said, he basically said, I supported the president's TARP plan, and it was what a good thing, and all those things, but he didn't actually want to answer what turns out, which Newt Gingrich said isn't really a hypothetical. It's something that we could be on the verge of very soon. Yeah. He didn't want to answer it because I think he didn't want to say I would do another TARP.
Well, we've got to take a break. We're going to come back. My colleague Charlie Rose will be right back with you. The Bloomberg Washington Post Republican debate continues in just 2 minutes' time. Stay with Bloomberg.
My financial advisor reminds me that paying interest buys me nothing and is all about the past. Today, we're spending $200 billion per year on interest alone on our national debt. But interest piles up like a credit card, and by 2055, interest payments will eat up 100% of all tax revenues. That's not a penny of revenue for healthcare, Social Security, defense, education, nothing, unless there are massive tax hikes, giant cuts, or both. Gee, thanks.
The air in your home has particles, like bacteria, mold spores, and dust mite debris. High-efficiency filters will trap many of these particles, but some filters can act like a brick wall, restricting airflow your furnace needs. The Filtrete Elite Allergen Reduction Filter is the best filter at trapping particles without restricting airflow. Stop particles, not airflow. There are filters, and then there are Filtrete filters.
My mom is, well, weird. She won't eat eggs without hot sauce. She has kind of funny-looking toes. She's always touching my hair. And she does this dancing finger thing.
With advanced technology from GE, now doctors can diagnose diseases like breast cancer on a cellular level so that women like Christy's mom can get personalized treatment that's as unique as she is.
She's definitely not like other moms. Yeah, my mom is pretty weird.
There are many ways to start the day, but for those of us who need to stay on top of business, only one gets to the point.
It's 6 o'clock here in New York City.
We've got a jam-packed morning
we'll
for you.
We'll be tracking the story from Asia to the Middle East.
Markets are rallying.
This is another Bloomberg exclusive. We're going to head to our market desk.
I'm so glad you could be here.
Everybody's watching these guys.
Now you're awake. Bloomberg Mornings.
Let's go down to find out exactly what this means to business today.
Welcome back. We're at the Republican presidential candidates debate. We're at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. And we're pleased now to turn it around a bit and have the candidates question each other. They will each have 30 seconds to pose an answer. We'll have 1 minute to respond, 30 seconds for a question, 1 minute to respond. They'll proceed in alphabetical order. I want you to remember, as we talk about this, we're talking about the economy, or those things that affect the economy. Beginning in alphabetical order, Congresswoman Bachmann.
Thank you. Well, in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan produced an economic miracle. And while all of us were wishing and yearning for a third term for Ronald Reagan, Governor Perry, you were campaigning and co-chairing Al Gore's election campaign for President of the United States. You went on to increase spending in Texas by over 50%, and you financed that spending by increasing bond debt by over 137%. That's exactly what Barack Obama has been doing, increasing debt by trillions of dollars. How can we trust you to not go down the Obama way and overspend and pay for that spending with indebtedness on the backs of the next generation?
Well, I, like most people in the state of Texas and in those southern states, grew up a Democrat. Michael Reagan and I were talking just the other day, Charlie, that I came to the Republican Party sooner in age than his dad, Ronald Reagan, did. And let me just address this issue of the debt in the state of Texas. Texas has the 6th lowest debt per capita. When I started as the governor back in 2000, and today, Texas has the 2nd lowest debt per capita in the United States. I think that's what America's looking for as a president of the United States that understands how to balance budgets, how to deal with the spending issue, and how to get Americans back working again.
Herman Cain, question.
Yes. One of my guiding principles has been and will always be surround yourself with good people. The 999 plan that I have proposed is simple, transparent, efficient, fair, and neutral. My question is to Governor Romney. Can you name all 59 points in your 160-page plan, and does it satisfy that criteria of being simple, transparent, efficient, fair, and neutral?
Herman, I've had the experience in my life of taking on some tough problems. And I must admit that simple answers are always very helpful, but oftentimes inadequate. And in my view, to get this economy going again, we're going to have to deal with more than just tax policy and just energy policy, even though both of those are part of my plan. And the other parts of my plan are these. One is to make sure that we stop the regulatory creep that's occurred in Washington. And all of the Obama regulations we say no to, we put a halt on them and reverse all of those that cost jobs. Number two, we have trade policies that open up new markets to American goods. And I lay out a number of things I do in that 59 points that open up more markets to American goods. And we, of course, stop the cheating that goes on. We also have to have the rule of law. By that I mean you can't have the federal government, through its friends at the National Labor Relations Board, saying to a company like Boeing that you can't build a factory in a non-union state. That's simply wrong and violates the principle of the rule of law. We also have to have institutions that create human capital. We're a capitalist system. But we don't just believe in physical capital or financial capital, also human capital. We need great schools, great institutions. Finally, you got to have a government that doesn't spend more money than it takes in. Those are the 7 major pillars of those 59.
So no, it's not simple, is what you're saying.
Let me tell you, to get this economy restructured fundamentally, to put America on a path to be the most competitive place in the world to create jobs, is going to take someone who knows how to do it. And it's not 1 or 2 things. It's a good number of things to get America strong.
All right. Speaker Gingrich, question.
Well, Governor Romney, let me say, first of all, there's an awful lot in your plan that's very good and that I think would be very helpful if implemented, a lot better than what Obama's doing. But one of the characteristics of Obama in his class warfare approach has been to talk about going after people who made over $250,000 a year and divide us. And I was a little surprised, I think it's about page 47 of your plan, that you have a capital gains tax cut for people under $200,000, which is actually lower than the Obama model. Now, as a businessman, you know that you actually lose economic effectiveness if you limit capital gains tax cuts only to people who don't get capital gains. So I'm curious, what was the rationale for setting an even lower base mark than Obama had?
Well, the reason for giving a tax break to middle-income Americans is that middle-income Americans have been the people who've been most hurt by the Obama economy. The reason you're seeing protests, as you indicated, in Wall Street and across the country, is middle-income Americans are having a hard time making ends meet. Not only do we have 25 million people out of work, or stop looking for work or in part-time jobs needing full-time employment. We just saw this week that median income in America has declined by 10% during the Obama years. People are having a hard time making ends meet. And so if I'm going to use precious dollars to reduce taxes, I want to focus on where the people are hurting the most, and that's the middle class. I'm not worried about rich people. They're doing just fine. The very poor have a safety net. They're taken care of. But the people in the middle, the hardworking Americans, are the people who need a break, and that's why I focused my tax cut right there.
Governor Huntsman.
Since this discussion is all about economics, Governor Romney, I promise this won't be about religion. Sorry about that, Rick. Since some might see you, because of your past employment with Bain Capital, as more of a financial engineer, somebody who breaks down businesses, destroys jobs as opposed to creating jobs and opportunity, leveraging up, spinning off, enriching shareholders. Since you were number 47 as governor of the state of Massachusetts, where we were number 1, for example, and the whole discussion around this campaign is going to be job creation. How can you win that debate given your background?
Well, my background is quite different than you described, John. So the way I'll win it is by telling people an accurate rendition of what I've done in my life. And fortunately, people in New Hampshire living next door have a pretty good sense of that. They understand that in the business I was in, we didn't take things apart and cut them off and sell them off. We instead helped start businesses. And they know some of the names. We started Staples. We started the Sports Authority. We started Bright Horizons Children's Centers. Heck, we even started a steel mill in a farm field in Indiana. And that steel mill operates today and employs a lot of people. So we began businesses. Sometimes we acquired businesses and tried to turn them around, typically effectively, and net created tens of thousands of new jobs. And I'm proud of the fact that we were able to do that. That's a big part of the American system. People are not going to, in my opinion, are not going to be looking for someone who's not successful. They want someone who has been successful and who knows how fundamentally the economy works. Look, I would not be in this race had I spent my life in politics alone. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But right now, with the American people in the kind of financial crisis they're in, they need someone who knows how to create jobs, and I do.
All right, Congressman Paul.
Since the Federal Reserve is the engine of inflation, creates the business cycle, produces our recessions and our depressions, the Federal Reserve obviously is a very important issue. And fortunately, tonight we have a former director of the Federal Reserve at Kansas City. So I have a question for Mr. Kaine. Mr. Kaine, in the past, you've been rather critical of any of us who would want to audit the Fed. You said you've used pretty strong terms that we were ignorant and that we didn't know what we were doing. And therefore, there was no need for a Fed audit anyway, because if you had one, you're not going to find out everything because everybody knows everything about the Fed. But now that we have found and we've gotten an audit, we have found out an awful lot on how special businesses get, bailed out. Wall Street, the banks, and special companies, foreign governments. And you said that you advised those of us who were concerned and you belittled. You say, call up the Federal Reserve and just ask them to get the PR person. So do you still stick by this, that this is frivolous, or do you think it's very important? 64% of the American people want a full audit of the Fed on a regular basis.
Mr. Kaine.
First of all, you have misquoted me. I did not call you or any of your people ignorant. I don't know where that came from.
I'll get it for you.
All right? Now, so you got to be careful of the stuff that you get off the internet because that's just not something that I have said. Secondly, when I served on the board of the Federal Reserve in the 1990s, we didn't do any of the things that this Federal Reserve is doing. I don't agree with the actions of this Federal Reserve. I don't agree with the actions that have been undertaken by Ben Bernanke. We didn't have a $14 trillion national debt to prop up with some of the actions that they're taking. And I have also said, to be precise, I do not object to the Federal Reserve being audited. I simply said, if someone wants to initiate that action, go right ahead. It doesn't bother me. So I've been misrepresented in that regard. I don't have a problem with the Federal Reserve being audited. It's simply not my top priority. My top priority is 999. Jobs, jobs, jobs.
Governor Perry, question for.
Governor Romney, your chief economic advisor, Glenn Hubbard, who you know well, he said that Romney Care was Obamacare. And Romney Care has driven the cost of small business insurance premiums up by 14% over the national average in Massachusetts. So my question for you would be, how would you respond to his criticism of your signature legislative achievement?
You know, the great thing about running for president is that you get the chance also to talk about your experience as a governor. And I'm proud of the fact that we took on a major problem in my state. And the problem was that we had a lot of kids without insurance, a lot of adults without insurance, but it added up to about 8% of our population. And we said, you know what, we want to find a way to get those folks insured, but we don't want to change anything for the 92% of the people that already have insurance. And so our plan dealt with those 8%, not the 92. One of the problems with Obamacare is he doesn't just deal with the people without insurance. He takes over health care for everyone. Then he does something else that Chris Christie said today. He said the problem with Obamacare is he spends an extra $1 trillion and raises taxes. And raising taxes is one of the big problems, something we didn't do in Massachusetts. He also cuts Medicare. But people out there talking about cutting Medicare, it's President Obama that did that. And I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish. I'll tell you this, though. We have the lowest number of kids as a percentage uninsured of any state in America. You have the highest. You have over, I'm still speaking. We have less than 1% of our kids that are uninsured. You have 1 million kids uninsured in Texas. 1 million kids. Under President Bush, the percentage uninsured went down. Under your leadership, it's gone up. I care about people. Now, our plan isn't perfect. Glenn Hubbard is a fine fellow. Take a look at his quote. Some people say that. Just because people say something doesn't mean it's true. The truth is, our plan is different, and the people in Massachusetts, if they don't like it, then get rid of it. Right now, they favor it 3-1. But I'm not running for governor of Massachusetts. I'm running for president of the United States. And as president, I will repeal Obamacare. I'll grant a waiver on day one to get that started. And I'll make sure that we return to the states what we had when I was governor, the right to care for our poor in the way we thought best for our respective states.
Senator Santorum.
Romney's before me. R.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. Governor Romney. Very good. I missed school that day. I missed school that day when they said R before S.
Think of us as your friends.
That's right. You'd think someone from PBS would know that.
Would know that, wouldn't they? I was thinking how much I was enjoying this.
Yeah, exactly right. Let me turn to Congresswoman Bachmann and just ask you, Congresswoman, as we've spoken this evening, we're all concerned about getting Americans back to work, and you've laid out some pretty bold ideas with regards to taxation and cutting back the scale of the federal government, and there's no question that's a very important element of getting people back to work. And I'd like to ask you to expand on your other ideas. What do you do to help the American people get back to work, be able to make ends meet? You got families that are sitting around the kitchen table wondering how they're going to make it to the end of the month. You got young people coming out of college, maybe not here at Dartmouth, but a lot of colleges across the country wondering where they can get a job. What would you do beyond the tax policies you described to get people back to work?
Well, I do understand that. I'm a mother of 28 kids, 23 foster kids, 5 biological kids. I get how difficult it is for young people right now to get jobs right out of college. It's very, very tough. And the solutions that I'm offering in my plan, which, if I can give a commercial, are at michellebachmann.com. The solutions that I'm offering aren't just a silver bullet. It's not just the tax code. It's also dealing with the regulatory burden. Because businesses, my husband and I started our own successful business. I'm 55. I spent my whole life in the private sector. I get job creation too. And the business world is looking at $1.8 trillion every year in compliance costs with government regulations. That has to go. So I want to get rid of that. It's the mother of all repeal bills. But the #1 reason that employers say that they aren't hiring today is Obamacare. And I was the leading critic for President Obama in Washington, D.C. against Obamacare. That's why I was the first member of Congress to introduce that bill to repeal Obamacare. I understand that's what's inhibiting job creation and job growth. We have to repeal that. I also introduced, and I fought on Barney Frank's committee against Dodd-Frank, which is the Housing Housing and Jobs Destruction Act. That's why I was the chief author of that bill as well. There's much more to my solutions. Go to michellebachmann.com and you can find out.
Yes, now?
Yes, now. We're in the live free or die state, and I oppose the single biggest government intrusion into the private sector, the Wall Street bailout, the TARP program. I opposed it because it violated the principles of our Constitution, the spirit of our Constitution, and because of the experience I had that if you open up the door of government involvement in the private sector, some president will, and in fact did, drive a truck through it and explode the size of the federal government and constrict our freedom. The interesting thing here is the four people on this panel that actually supported TARP at the time of its passage are the people who say that they are the anti-Washington candidates, that they are the business candidates. And they're the four on this program that supported the Washington bailout, giving Washington, naively, I would say, tools to constrict our freedom.
So do you have a question for
my question is, you prompted it perfectly, because here's my question. My question is, since I think Herman Cain is giving naively a tool in his 999 plan of giving Washington a huge new tax opportunity to get money through a sales tax, can we trust you that with your lack of experience that you won't continually give Washington the ability to take freedom away from freedom-loving people here in the live free or die state? There are three deterrents to the... And by the way, the four people were Governor Huntsman, Governor Perry, Herman Cain, and Governor Romney all supported TARP. There are three deterrents to this nightmare scenario you described in terms of how bad things are going to be because we're trying to fix the real problem. The first deterrent is that I'm going to ask the United States Congress to include a 2/3 majority vote before they can raise the 999 tax. The second deterrent is the fact that because it is visible, simple, and transparent, the American people are going to be the ones to hold Congress's feet to the fire. The third deterrent is that I will be president and I won't sign anything that raises the 999.
Yeah. President forever.
With that, we take a break and come back for our final segment. Stay with us.
To address the spending side of our debt problem, you have to pay attention to all the big-ticket items. That includes defense spending. The United States spends more on national defense than the next 17 countries combined. Perhaps you've heard of Admiral Mullen. He thinks that the greatest threat to our national security is our debt. I agree. And that's why it's time to put a bipartisan plan in place to address our greatest threat, our debt.
If no one ever challenged the status quo, the Earth would still be flat. Rock would have no role. For decades, Infiniti has challenged what a luxury car should be. We built the world's first high-performance hybrid to achieve 32 mpg, the first around-view monitor. We believe a luxury car should connect you to the road. It should move you emotionally and inspire. Infiniti, inspired performance.
Providing clean water for the village, but there are several villages nearby that could use our new system.
Introducing GoToMeeting with HD Faces. Simple, high-definition group video conferencing that will change the way you work. And perhaps a whole lot more. Visit GoToMeeting.com and sign up for your free 30-day trial.
Every buy has a sell.
We've got some bulls, we've got some bears. Somewhere in there's a consensus.
And every close has an open.
The closing bell has rung here in the U.S., but trading, of course, has not stopped.
When the market's wrapping up, we're there and getting you ready for tomorrow.
Welcome to Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Lisa Murphy.
I'm Adam Johnson, and this is Street Smart.
All the news you need to be smart on the street.
Now reality sets back in. We're down 240.
The sell-off will continue overnight.
Street Smart with Lisa Murphy and Adam Johnson. Your need to know doesn't stop when the market closes.
There are those who say that we shouldn't deal with our debt now because it might hurt the fragile economic recovery. Well, I beg to differ. Getting our fiscal house in order will help build confidence in our economy today. We need a long-term plan now that gets implemented when the economy recovers, because the world I'm growing up in is more and more competitive.
To keep up, we need investments in research and development, education, and infrastructure. But by 2035, government will spend 4 times as much on interest than those things combined.
How can I compete if you're wasting money on interest instead of investing in my future? And making our debt worse are tax expenditures. That is revenue losses due to subsidies, exemptions, and loopholes in the tax system. These add up to over $1 trillion per year and make our tax system complicated and less competitive. Trillions in interest, trillions in tax expenditures. Even a kid can tell you this stuff adds up.
We are back at Dartmouth in Hanover, New Hampshire, talking with the 8 Republican candidates about a variety of issues. Clearly, we come back to health care. I want to go to Governor Perry. Explain to me what you think the difference is about your health care ideas and Governor Romney's health care ideas, and how you see mandates and how he sees mandates and the Constitution, because not only has there been some exchange here, Governor Christie got involved today.
Well, certainly the issue of health care is probably one of the biggest one that's facing us. I mean, there are a lot of Americans sitting out there today, and getting those people back to work is the most important thing that we do as a country, so that they can have the opportunity to purchase health care. And I think that is probably the biggest issue that are facing Americans. There are people sitting out there around the kitchen table watching TV tonight, who are looking for someone to lay out an idea that truly will get this country back working again. And that's why I lay out, without having any congressional impact at all, how to get our energy industry back to work and back to work very quickly. But in the state of Texas, from the standpoint of what we've done to make access of health care better, we passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation in 2003. We also passed Healthy Texas, which expands the private sector insurance, and we've driven down the cost of insurance by 30%. So those are some of the ways that the states, but the real issue for us is Medicaid and how to get the flexibility on Medicaid so that the innovators can occur in the states. I can promise you, whether it's Governor Jindal or myself or Susana Martinez over in New Mexico, that's where you'll find the real innovation in health care. The way to deliver health care more efficiently, more effectively, is to block grant those dollars back to the state and keep this federal government that has this one-size-fits-all mentality from driving the thought process that we've seen that's destroyed health care in this country today.
But Governor Perry, as the Washington Post fact checker noted, Texas has had 16 waivers for Medicaid. So how can you say that the problem is that the federal government has not given Texas enough flexibility?
They haven't anywhere near given the states. I think what you should see is the block granting, not having to go to Washington, D.C. and ask them, Mother may I, every time you come up with a concept or an idea. Block granting back to the states. I'll guarantee you the governors and their innovators in their states will come up with ways to better deliver health care more efficiently, more effectively, more cost efficiently, and that's what this country is looking for, is a president who understands that we have these 50 laboratories of innovation. Free up these states from Washington, D.C.'s one-size-fits-all.
Juliana.
Thank you, Charlie. Mr. Kaine, you disapprove of Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, and we all know that your priority is 999. But one of the most important appointments that you're going to have to make your first year, should you be president, would be Fed Chairman. So which Federal Reserve Chairman over the last 40 years do you think has been most successful and might serve as a model for that appointment?
Alan Greenspan.
Why?
Because that's when I served on the board of the Federal Reserve in the early 1990s. And the way Alan Greenspan oversaw the Fed and the way he coordinated with all of the Federal Reserve banks, I think that it worked fine back in the early 1990s. Now, on that same point, I have already identified 2 candidates, which I cannot give their names, to replace Mr. Bernanke in anticipation of having that responsibility. We must narrow the mission of the Fed first. I don't believe in ending the Fed. I believe we can fix the Fed by getting their mission refocused on monetary price stability, and I have candidates in mind that will help us do that.
So you have 2 appointments waiting in the wings for 2013, for that when his
Yes.
term is up 2014.
Yes, I have 2 candidates waiting in the wings.
How about a hint?
To take that job. I got to keep them confidential.
Okay, Congressman Paul.